Okay, good morning, dear friends. A lot to discuss this morning, but one central and very important idea. The Parsha makes a very unusual juxtaposition, what we call in Hebrew, smichot, when two ideas are put next to each other in the Torah, two themes. Those two themes, although they seem unrelated, are always connected. And when that happens in the same pasuk, and yet these themes seem so different, it's hard to find the connection. Much of life, I have found, is finding the connection between events and people. So in chapter 14 of Devarim, in our Parsha, it does discuss such an event. And it says very beautifully, Banim atem lashem Elokechem. You the Jewish people, this is Moshe Rabbeinu, speaking to the entire Jewish people, from that point to the end of history. And he says, you are very, very special to me. You're like children. There's a childlike aspect between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We are Hashem's children, and Hashem is our Father in heaven, as we say, Avinu Malkeinu. We're saying that very soon, right? Avinu Malkeinu. He is our Father, and He is our King. There's a very childlike relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now, what would you think is going to follow a statement like that? I love you, you're like my children. What should follow such a statement? You're amazing, here's my credit card, go enjoy yourself. Do not say that to your kids. Never, ever say that to your kids, because they will take full advantage of it. I don't know, maybe it'll say, go do more mitzvot, do chesed, do charity. You know what it says in the same pasuk? After it says that you are my children, do not titgodedu. Do not make a laceration, a cut in your hair. Lo tasim karcha benenechem lamet. When one of your very close relatives dies. What? What is this? This is actually a mitzvah in the Torah that is being repeated. It was actually mentioned in Vayikra. Before, in chapter 19 or so, in Sefer Vayikra, there's a mitzvah saying, it's a lotas, you're not allowed, when someone you love dies, you're not allowed to attack yourself, to cut yourself, to rip out hair, to cut yourself with a knife. Why? Ribono Shel Olam, why would anyone want to do such a weird, unusual thing? And why does the Torah saying, oh, this is something that you should know as my child, says Hashem, you should never, ever cut yourself as a way of mourning a dead person. What does that mean? You can't mourn? Of course, we have Evelut. When a person dies, we see with Moshe died and Aaron died, we see people mourned. There's a way to mourn. You can cry, you can weep. Avraham Avinu wept. He cried for his wife Sarah when she died. And that's okay. And we sit, Shiva, we sit for 7 days, and we mourn, and the intensity of the mourning starts to reduce as the year goes. It goes from the day itself, to the week, to the month. We have Shloshim, and then we have the entire year, and then forever we have this yearly Shana, this yearly recognition and remembrance. But the Torah says, do not overdo it. There is a custom, and Rashi says, among some of the nations which back then did it, and by the way, they still do it today, and that is to cut yourself. When they mourn, when they're upset, they take knives and they flay themselves and cut and rip out their hair and cut a gash between their eyes or on their bodies. You may have seen it. They hurt themselves. Torah says this is the worst thing you can do. Why is that? So the rabbis tell us something very, very important. This is a key feature of what being Jewish is actually all about. As being a child of God, which every human is, you have to realize that your neshama comes from Hashem, just like your neshama and body come from your parents. That is the parent analogy, banim. And even though a person dies, someone you love very, very, very much, the neshama lives on forever. The neshama is just returning to God. When a person hurts themselves out of mourning for someone else, what are they really saying? This is the worst thing ever. I can't imagine anything as bad as this. It's bad. It's really bad. It's incredibly sad. But your sadness is not, God bless you, your sadness is not for them. Your sadness is for yourself. This is the mistake. You see, when you lacerate yourself, you're saying, this soul is gone, we'll never see it again, it's all over. You know what the Torah is telling us? That death is not the end. It's just a new beginning. The neshama goes back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from whence it came. And therefore, when you over-mourn, when you overdo it, you're actually saying, I don't believe there's a neshama. I don't believe the soul goes anywhere. So much so that I'm willing to even hurt myself in this world. Hashem says, but that's not true. You're allowed to be upset, but you're not mourning for that person's neshama. They've gone on to Olam HaEmet. And if you hear any near-death experiences, of which there are hundreds of thousands you can just hear about, read about online or wherever in books, you see these people are actually comforted. There's a light. There's an amazing feeling of love. Many of them will say that they went and they did not want to come back, but they were forced back into their bodies. Hashem is telling us that death is just a transition. That's why the word for a dead person is a niftar. Niftar is patur. Same like, what does patur mean? They're patur min mitzvot. They've moved on to the next world, and they're now not expected to move on and do mitzvot because their job is done. We're in this world, olam asiyah, to do the job, and then you pass on to the next world to receive the reward for all of your efforts. So this form of mourning that a person does actually is the ultimate declaration that Hashem is the king. I move on, I have a Father in heaven, and He wants the best for me. And that, my friends, is the greatest baracha a person can have. When we've spoken a lot, I can tell you a very funny story. Actually, I was driving in this morning, and this story came to my head. Quick baracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. I needed that. Okay. I must tell you one story. We're talking about brachot and klalot, blessings and curses. And many people will receive a bracha and think it's a bracha, and actually it's not. And many people will receive a curse, a klala, and actually it's a bracha in disguise. A bracha in disguise. I must tell you one story, which it came to my head this morning on the drive-in. I was listening to a shiur, it came to my head. I must tell you this story. I loved being a counselor in camp. There was a camp I went to. It was called Camp Monroe. It's now defunct, but it was an amazing camp. And many, many famous people actually went to this camp. Way before me, I should say. I think Woody Allen went there, and Larry David, they say, I don't know. But this camp was owned by owners who became a lot more Jewishly affiliated as the years went by. And it became an outreach camp. And I was at university in England, and they used to recruit an organization called Camp America, Jewish boys and girls, to come out to America and to be counselors at this camp. And I did it for a number of summers, and it really was an extremely rewarding. Actually, one of the reasons I ended up living in America is because of the connections I built up. Many, many people who were campers of mine end up getting married. I performed their weddings. I must tell you one incident that happened to me at this camp. It's a very funny story, actually, and I tell it with permission. That happened at this camp. So I went to this camp, and there was one night where all the counselors, of which I was one, did a talent competition. You know these talent shows? Okay, now it's very famous. So I put myself in this talent show, and I made, if I remember correctly, a very elaborate dance. This was very, very stupid. But we were entertaining all the kids. There were like 900 kids in this camp. So I said to the head of the camp, his name was Lenny, I said, I need costume. He goes, no problem. Go to my cabin. There is a green crate. I won't forget this. A green, take out things, costumes from that green gate. Only that green crate. So I said, fine. I went to his cabin, and I see, Tucker, there's a green crate over there. I take the contents, and I pour it out, and I start rummaging around, right? And things are falling around because it's a big crate, and things are going. And I find this great cloak, and I find these funny shoes, and I find this funny wig, and I put it all together. I go out on stage. If I say so myself, I did the most amazing, hysterical act and dance, and the kids were laughing, and the counselors were laughing. And during this act, I'm dancing around, and I take the coat, and I throw it into the audience, and I take the wig, and I spin it around, and I throw it out to the audience. And I finish off, and there's a big round of applause, and I don't know if I won the competition, whatever it was. The guy who owns the camp comes over to me with the most angriest look, and he's the nicest guy. He's a good friend of mine, Ad Hayom, as you'll see in a second. He comes over to me, and he says to me, and he's furious. He's like, I told you to only take the items in the crate. And I said, Ribono, I did. He goes, you did not. There was something on the bed, and you took it, and you used it. I said, well, I did empty out the contents onto the bed, you're right, in order to sift through all the stuff. He goes, what was it? He goes, you took my wife's shaitel. I just bought a brand new, expensive wig for my wife. We'd saved up, and I bought it. And I remembered, you're right, when I emptied out all the contents, the wig was there, I took it, and not only did I take it without permission, this poor woman, I took it, and during the performance, I swung it around, and I threw it out into the audience, and was caught by one of the kids. He was so angry. And listen to what he said to me. And this is all about how a klala, a curse, actually in many cases is a bracha in disguise. He says, one day, I'm giving you a curse, one day, you are going to have to buy an expensive shaitel for your wife, and you're going to see what it's like when it's mistreated. Now, I think to myself, this guy's completely crazy. Right? First of all, I'm not married. I was like 19. Right? I'm thinking about, and why would my wife wear a shaitel? What? Cover her hair? I'm like, none of my family ever did. This is not something that was in my head. I wasn't the most religious, but I was like, what are you even talking about? And he said, just mark my words. The camp finished. I remained good friends. I moved to New York. He's actually one of my neighbors. And I went to Sheva Brachot a couple of weeks ago of his granddaughter. That's how close we are. I actually performed one of his daughter's weddings, and actually his granddaughter became a rabbi. And he stood up and he said, many times people give you a klala, a curse, and you think, oh no, what's going to be? But really the curse, when a curse comes from the heart, when rebuke comes from the heart, which Moshe Rabbeinu is doing right now, it's actually a bracha. You have to go to dig a little bit deep and also see the bracha. And he said, my granddaughter now is awake, and he looked at me and says, the curse I gave you ended up becoming the greatest bracha you could ever have. It's a bracha. You should have a wife, you should have kids, you should live a family of purity, and all should be good with you. My friends, so many times in life, things happen to us, we think, why is Hashem doing this to us? Why am I being persecuted at work, with my friends, with my family? You just don't know the end of the story. Moshe Rabbeinu is spending his entire speech. This is imagine a rabbi giving a 1 month speech. He'd be fired. Well, Moshe Rabbeinu is about to die. He doesn't care. So all of Sefer Devarim is really a 1 month speech. And his final words. And he's rebuking again and again. And he's warning them, don't do this. Act this way. Get rid of those people. Do the mitzvot that are important on the land of Israel. And we're saying, Ribono Shel Olam, this is how you talk to your people before you leave Olam Hamet, before you leave this world? The answer is, it is rebuke. But within the rebuke, my friends, we see something very, very special, and that is the bracha. You've got to look for the brachot. It's hard. It may take weeks, months, or in my case, 9 years to see the eventual bracha that is actually encoded inside the Torah and people's words as well. Okay, with that in mind, the parsha then takes another weird 180 degrees and starts to talk about kashrut, things that are kosher and things that are not kosher. It's very hard to follow, but once again, we have a concept in Judaism that when ideas, themes are put next to each other in the Torah, they are connected. And sometimes you've got to really work on a Rashi. Spends a lot of his time trying to figure out what the kesher, what the connection is. If they are what's called smichot, they're samuch. They are put one next to each other. You know? Okay. So let's talk about kashrut for just a couple of minutes, and let's figure out what it's doing over here. So the Torah starts to list various creatures that are kasher, and what makes, actually I always say, it's not a mitzvah to eat kosher. There's no mitzvah to eat kosher. There's just an aveira to eat not kosher. So it's actually part of the lo ta'aseh, the forbidden acts in the Torah. You got to eat kosher. You got to eat. Okay? If you got to eat, you might as well eat kosher food because you can't eat non-kosher food. So it's actually a lo ta'aseh. And we're told that every animal that we want to eat, a behemah, must have shtei simanim, two simanim, two signs. What are the two signs for every kosher animal? Everyone knows this. It needs to have a split hoof, a completely split hoof, right? Parsa, v'shot sesha, a complete split hoof. Why? Could an animal have a partially split hoof? Yeah, like a giraffe, right? A giraffe. A gamal has a partially split tooth. It's split on top, but there's a webbing. There's a webbing. Sorry, I take that back. I take that back. A gamal is a camel. Giraffe's a kosher. You're right. Very good. I saw your faces. I'm sorry. Giraffe is kosher. A camel, a gamal, a camel. I said giraffe. A camel is split on top, but it's got webbing underneath. Hashem did a very special favor because it's got to go into the sand. So there's a webbing underneath. So a camel is not kosher, but it does have one sign. It's malegera. It chews the cud. So you see camels walking around like, constantly chewing, although they haven't eaten in a while. Okay, so a camel has that. A giraffe actually is a kosher animal. As a side point, we just don't eat it because they're pretty much restricted to be eaten. And people say, when I was a kid, they said they don't know where to shecht it on the long neck. That's ridiculous. They know exactly how to kill it, right? It's just a protected species and probably not so tasty, very muscly and not very fatty animal. So, but if you were and you needed to, you would be permitted to eat a giraffe. But a camel is not kosher. So everything needs to have two simanim. It needs to have a split tooth and chew the cud. There is one animal, by the way, that the Torah pulls out from all the other behemoth that has the other way around. It's got a split tooth, but it doesn't chew the cud. And that is the pig, the chazir. By the Torah tells, this is amazing. Think about this. The Torah tells us this is the only animal, the only one that is going to have this way round, split tooth, but does not chew the cud. Once it eats, that's the end of it. It's like a human, it passes right through. By the way, how could the Torah say this? Only Hashem can say it, because maybe they'd discover an animal 1,000 years later that actually does this as well. Torah says, no, this is the only animal. And by the way, if you look at it, it is the only animal ever. It's a big claim for the Torah to make, but only Hashem's Torah can do this, that this animal is the only animal. By the way, why do we pick on the pig? I feel sorry for the pig sometimes. Why do we pick on the chazir more than every other animal? Why does the chazir get such a bad rap? It's actually worse, la halacha, to eat an insect deliberately than a pig, because it's a crawling and a flying creature. So there's more isurim to eat an insect than there is a pig, right? And yet, we don't say, the fly, that's a bad creature, right? The mosquito, the locust kosher, right? We don't say that, yeah? So why do we pick on the pig? Great question. I'll give you a couple of very interesting answers. Number one is, we don't like the pig because it's a liar. It's faking you out. What's it saying? Look, I'm kosher. I've got a split hoof. But inside you're not kosher. Your insides don't match your outsides. We don't like that. That is a bad siman of any animal and any human. Your outsides, your actions, the way you present yourself, should ideally match your insides. And so the pig is the only animal that does that. Its outsides are inconsistent with what's happening inside. Another non-kosher animal, it's honest. It's honest. Its outside's not kosher. Its inside's not kosher. We get it, but not the pig. The pig is trying to fake you out. Another deeper reason about the pig is the pig represents certain nations of the world who present themselves as kosher on the outside, like Esav and his descendants. They present themselves kosher on the outside, but inside they're rotten to the core, right? They're not malagera. They don't chew the cud. So we don't like that. We don't like fake people. If you want to be fake, we don't want you to be fake. If you want to lie, if you want to be non-kosher, gay gesund. Just make sure your outsides match your insides in your non-kosherness. Okay. I want to share with you, we'll finish with this because we've extended our time. Just one more minute. The Ramban says, these animals that are listed that have these traits have something in common. What do all kosher animals, for the most part, I should say, and most non-kosher animals have in common? And the Ramban says this, and it's actually according to Kabbalah. The Kabbalists talk about it. You'll notice that most kosher animals are prey. They are the prey. I don't mean prey, P-R-A-Y, P-R-E-Y, right? They are attacked by other animals. Most non-kosher animals, non-kosher, are the predator. And the Ramban says very famously that what you eat is going to become who you are. All right? I don't like the expression, you are what you eat, because I eat chicken, I'm not a chicken, and I eat cow, right, and I'm not a cow. However, you can't say you are what you eat, but you can say what you eat becomes who you are. It affects your neshama. Therefore, for example, you can't drink the blood of an animal. That's an isur d'oraita. You cannot drink the blood of an animal. Actually, human blood is also forbidden, but only rabbinically. When the Torah talks about don't drink blood, kidami hanefesh, it actually means animal blood. Human blood is also basically, if you have a cut on your, you shouldn't lick it. It's rabbinically prohibited as a side point. You should know that. But min Torah, it's the animal. Why? Because when you drink the blood and when you eat the meat of a non-kosher animal, it ends up impacting your neshama and making you take on the character traits of that animal. That's why you see lions and tigers and such animals and vultures and other animal creatures that attack and are predators. We don't eat. We eat the prey. We want to have a certain gentle nature to ourselves, and that is reflected by the food that we eat. That, my friends, is one of the secrets behind the kashrut, and therefore it's going to affect your midot. Say the rabbis, that's the connection over here. Why is kashrut popping up over here? Well, it kind of makes sense. We're about to enter into Israel, dealing with animals and livestock. So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling you, you're going to have lots of sheep and animals, and stay away from the pigs. Stay away from the boars, right? Stay away from them. But also, it comes from this. Your midot are important too. And your midot relate to other people and to Hashem are important. Don't forget to eat kosher food, because that's going to affect your neshama and your midot as well. One last story, I apologize. I've extended my time. There was a letter that was sent to the Rambam from the Jews in Yemen. The Jews in Yemen are obsessed with the Rambam. They love the Rambam. They actually follow the Rambam, la halacha. They don't follow the Shulchan Aruch. They follow the Rambam. If you're Yemenite, the Rambam is kadosh, because he saved their lives. He actually helped them when it came to a lot of false Mashiachs they had to deal with. So they followed. So there was a letter they said, a lot of the kids in Yemen were going off the derech. They were leaving the path. So the Rambam wrote back to them and said, check, this is the story, check the knife of the shochet, the ritual slaughterer. Check his knife. So they did, and they saw there were nicks in it. They rendered it non-kosher, which made the animals that it killed also non-kosher. Right? By the way, they said it was an accidental mistake, but he wasn't checking his knife well enough. He needed to sharpen his knife. They ended up checking it. They fixed it. And they said all the kids who were off started to eat kosher food again, and they all came back. Is there a connection? I don't know. And it's very characteristic with a Rambam to say such a thing, but it's based upon this concept that what the food you eat affects your midot. It affects your connection. Non-kosher food is metamtem etalev. It blocks your heart. Says Rashi, it stops your sechel from working. That is why we put so much emphasis on kashrut, trying our utmost to make sure the food that goes into us is of the right status, to make sure that it affects the neshama in the right way. Wishing you all a very successful day. Chazak HaBaruch.